As somebody once said, art without capitalism is like an alligator without a bicycle, you know.
Hi, welcome along to today's vlog. Today's vlog is a coffee with Dan with Chuck Sher of Sher Music & Co. They are the publishers of the New Reel book, the World's Greatest Fake book, the Michael Brecker Practice book, loads and loads of books. All the New Reel stuff has come from Chuck. Chuck has been active in the music business since the 1970s. He gives us some great insights into his reasons for launching Sher Music, his reasons for having those beautifully curated lead sheets that you get in the New Reel books, some of the challenges he's faced over the years, and some of the new books that they're offering, and why Sher Music is so keen to enable jazz educators and jazz students to learn more about the music. I hope you found this interview useful. Please don't forget to hit a like and a subscribe, and check out Sher Music's link below and see the amount of books they have on offer. Without further ado, handing over to the Zoom interview I did with Chuck yesterday. What was the moment that made you realize you wanted to start a music publishing company? What was that moment? When did it happen? And what were the people involved in that?
Well, it was a complete accident, which is that I got terrible tendonitis at one point and couldn't play for over a year. So while I'm sitting there, I figured, well, I might as well make some use out of my time. So I took all the notes that I'd kept from teaching bass, both upright and electric, and put them together. And that was the improviser's bass method, which came out in 1979. And it was, like I said, it was just an accident or fate, I believe. I really feel like, Sure Music has a mission to keep the jazz spirit alive. And so things have happened all the way through. Like when I started playing again, there was a young piano player, 18 years old at the time, named Bob Bauer, who I was lucky enough to play some sessions with. And Bob, even at 18, was one of the best jazz piano players I ever heard. And not only that, he had super ears. You know, he told me, he says, I don't have perfect pitch, but I have really good relative pitch. So if you give me the first note, I could take down a Shostakovich symphony for you. Yeah. So, it's like things like that have happened all through my career as a publisher, that just the right person showed up at the right time.
What were the biggest challenges that you faced in those early days, in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, when you're trying to get your books out there?
Well, the improviser's bass method came out in 1979. And then Sky Evergreen, Bob Bauer changed his name later in his life. He passed away from AIDS in 94, I think. But anyway, Sky told me that he'd be happy to collaborate with me on our first fake book, The World's Greatest Fake Book. And people still tell me that's the best book you've ever done, Chuck. Uh, we actually, I have a little rehearsal band here, plays once a week, and we've been playing tunes out of the World's Greatest Fake Book for a couple of months now, and just one great composition after another. Because the World's Greatest Fake Book is all the great tunes that the old real book didn't have. But it was a little too obscure for mass marketing. So then I decided that I should put out a legal and much improved version of the old real book. So that's what we did, and that came out, I forget now, what year, 92 or something? Is that right? And ever since then, we've had a viable company here because the new rule book, volume one, really filled a need. Now, Hal Leonard has a legal version of the old illegal real book, but at the time the new real book came out, we were the only good legal fake book
Yeah.
out
I've
there.
I've got a story with that as well, Chuck. I was saying on the Brecker Practice Books video. I remember my late great teacher Ray Wilkes used to have the new real book on his piano stand. And
Yeah,
it had a picture of Mike Brecker in black and white on the left hand side, just before
yeah,
you turn the page over to S sketch, I think.
there
And
you go.
I just remember seeing that as an 11, 12-year-old and going, wow, and then deliberately going finding the recording, because you couldn't just go on the internet then and find the recording. You had to go to a record shop and find the particular recording. And so that even touched me as an 11, 12-year-old, and it's part of my journey. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for even just including those images that as musicians we often don't want in, but actually a good image can speak powerfully to people, and can turn people onto the music.
Yeah, it's surprised me that the parts of my fake books that were the most fun in a way was finding great photos and also producing covers that really grabs people attention and it grabbed my own attention. My wife is a great mosaic artist, so a lot of them came from her work, like the cover for the Standards Real Book. I assume you've seen that. It's a
Yeah.
big treble clef in mosaics, and she was a weaver. And I said, "Well, I need a book cover here. What can you do that'll give people the sense of something that has lasted for centuries?" For the Standards Real Book, because it was full of tunes that will last for centuries. And she said, "Well, I could try a mosaic." And then out comes this gorgeous treble clef.
What's you mentioned there with your wife with the covers? What are some of the other behind the scenes processes of curating the books you put together? What goes into the background of a truly great music book?
Well, for the fake books, I there was a great radio station here in the Bay Area called K-Jazz, and I was friends with the some of the DJs there. They were actually we had a band called the K-Jazz All Stars, so we used to play gigs and stuff. So I'd go up to the radio station, and if I got permission to use Lou Donaldson's tunes, I'd go and listen to all the Lou Donaldson records and find the ones that I wanted to put in a book. So it was labor intensive, but a labor of love. I had a great time with all that.
Do you work on the transcriptions yourself? Do you bring people in? Do you outsource that, to sort of put the lead sheets together, or are you gathering it from other sources? What's the sort of method for putting
Well,
it together?
yeah, like I said, Sky Evergreen was our first transcriber. So he's the one who got all the transcriptions together for the World's Greatest Fake Book and the New Real Book, Volume One and Two. By the time Volume Three came around, he was pretty ill with AIDS, and so Larry Dunlap took over in the middle of that project. And Larry's been doing all my transcriptions since. He was the accompanist for Dame Cleo Lane for
Yeah.
20 years, and John Dankworth, and a great piano player. And again, he doesn't miss. His ears are pretty honed in there.
So many
Yeah.
musicians struggle with turning their passion into a business. I mean, what advice would you have for sort of up and coming musicians, who are trying to make a living out of music? And not necessarily going into publishing, but in terms of, you found a great way there to, you had that, as you said, fate that allowed you to turn on to publishing, and particularly publishing jazz books. I mean,
Yeah.
what would you sort of share with a younger musician in terms of what they need to do, particularly as we enter, well, we're midway through almost, or a quarter of a way through the 21st century, and then the roadmap seems almost empty in terms of how you make a living as a musician in this day and age.
Yeah, I don't know what I would suggest. I mean, I was a workaholic. I spent, most of my waking hours getting sheer music together. So as I've said over the years, if it was simple, everybody would have done it. But it wasn't simple. It's a lot of work. But ever since I was a kid, I've really loved jazz music, and I feel honored to be allowed to participate in it. I've been a jazz bass player since I was 19 years old, and but as you said, it's no way to make a living unless you're really a great player. So most people teach. I know a lot of musicians are making nice, comfortable living teaching that you could never do just by playing gigs. So, as somebody once said, art without capitalism is like an alligator without a bicycle.
How has the way musicians learn and consume educational material changed in that 40 odd years since you started Sher Music?
Well, of course, the big change is the internet. Um, seems that people get a lot of their information from YouTube, and which I do too. Certainly a great resource. But if you don't read and get something behind the just the images of how somebody does something, that certainly is helpful. But it's kind of superficial, I think, because you know what the guy played, but you don't know why he played it. So a good method book, which we have a bunch of, gives you an insight of how people came up with the ideas that they play. And so I think it's important that people continue to study, and it's a real concern.
I notice a very extensive, as everyone watching this will do, CD collection behind and record collection. I always ask my guests this: what would be your top three desert island jazz discs? Yeah, I'm just
Ah,
to jazz records. Who would you be recommending? So give me top two, and then one that maybe people may not have heard of.
well, I've been a big Bill Evans fan since I was, 8 years old. And so certainly the Village Vanguard records would be at the top of my list. They never get old because it's just genius, absolute genius from all three of them. And so there's that. Um, then, Coltrane would be the other one. I'd say a Love Supreme. I I think that should be essential listening for any jazz musician. I've been playing a lot. I have a radio show too on public radio here in California. And I've been playing a track called The Promise, which is on live at Birdland, I think. And there's something about that cut that it's like it's such a statement and such an incredible example of how to swing for one. Like McCoy Tyner's solo on The Promise is just the swingingest thing ever. And then Train comes in and just blows the whole thing wide open.
What's a book that you find yourself gifting to friends, family, or people more often than not, or would you sort of recommend for them to read?
God, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
I was a big egghead as a kid, so I read a million books. I think, as I get older, it's important to figure out why we're here. So I've read a lot of spiritual things. I've studied Gurdjieff's teachings for many years. The book I've read lately that really got me was called The Hidden Heart of the Cosmos by Brian Swimme, Swimme. And his take on it is really something, which he says the universe isn't an accident. If you go back and study what they know about the beginning of the universe, when after the Big Bang, the universe expands, right? He said if it was 100,000th of an expansion faster, then there would be no stars and no galaxies and no us. It would have just gone out forever. And conversely, if the expansion had been a little bit slower, then it all would have collapsed on itself sooner rather than later. So it's like the universe just happened perfectly in order to create what is obviously not accidental. I mean, things are too hip to be accidental. You know what I'm saying?
Like Swing and like Coltrane on that record, definitely. Sure. What's in the pipeline now for Share Music? I've mentioned before about the Bracker books. Have we got any other books that are coming out soon, or just you've just released?
Well, we released a book called the Bob Mover Jazz Lexicon. He was a practice buddy of Michael Brecker's for years. They would get together when they were both in town and go through stuff. And it's an interesting book. And we just put out a second edition of it that's much better organized. So anybody out there who has the first edition, I'm giving away PDFs of the second edition to people who bought the first edition.
Oh, excellent. How do people get that, Chuck?
Well, all I have to do is write Sheer Music, which is Sheer Muse, M-U-S-E, at sonic.net. Last year, we published, I think, a real landmark book called Logic and Critical Thinking in Jazz Improvisation by Vincent Herring. And, I've known Vincent's playing for a lot of years, and he's one of the better saxophone players that ever lived, if you ask me. And for some reason, he's managed to kind of channel the spirit of Cannonball Adderley. He's got Cannonball's sense of forward motion that very few people have. And so when he said he had a book that he was working on, I jumped right on it and said, sure. And he did a great job on that. People find it very useful. And even as a bass player, I've found it very helpful. And
I will just reach down. I'm actually pleased to say I have a signed copy from Vincent here, and we will be interviewing Vincent soon on the channel. So if people want to know more about that book, it's coming up. Excellent book. It's down here because it's right by my own practice music stance. I've been working on that as well as the one with the Brecker sort of practice on. I've been just tearing apart this. What I love about the Brecker books is there's just you can just take one idea and that can be weeks of work, just kind of one of the exercises, and just really, if you really internalize it, it can take, well, probably months actually to get it right.
yeah, as a matter of fact, I remember some interview with Michael, and he said, yeah, I go to the gig and sometimes I just have to apologize to the band. I says, I got these 6 licks I'm working on here, and I'm sorry, but I got to keep working on them. But nobody complained.
What do you hope the legacy will be of your work with Sheer Music? What do you hope it's going to have impacted on the world?
Well, the the younger generation, they only know the earlier parts of jazz, and I'm talking about bebop. I'm not even going back before then, but it's like ancient history to them. And I hope that, for one, that our fake books stay in print forever and that people will be motivated to go back and listen to all the great people, Chet Baker and people that aren't on the internet so much. Uh, I feel like we've documented a good chunk of the most beautiful compositions in jazz, and I hope people play those songs forever. I know personally, jazz music really touches a part of me that nothing else can get there. It's it's so soulful and human. You listen to a lot of the music and you know that it was some AI machine that did it, and it's like, no, sorry. It's got to have that human feeling.
What a great place to leave it. That's actually my hope. I mean, I've dealt with it, done a few papers on AI music, and I've been doing some research on it. And the big thing I say to my students is my great hope is that as humans we will find out even now how saturated we are with artificial music, and people will want to go back and feel real music heart to heart and
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
that connection with this most human of art forms, which is music, which we have a great gift.
Yeah.
We need to share it. And a computer has never had its heart broken, has never
No.
woken up on the wrong side of bed, has ever woken up on the right side of the bed next to a beautiful man or a beautiful woman. And that is what music is about. And it's about expressing that joys of life. And so I'm hopeful that that people will start coming back to jazz as well, and to music that really moves people. And I think as musicians, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're studying the great music that you've catalogued, and interpreting that and creating our own music that really speaks to people in our times as well. So, Chuck,
Yeah.
thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate your work. Where can people find the books? What's your website?
Very simple. It's www.shermusic.com, Sher. So
Brilliant. I'll place the link below anyway. Chuck, thank you for joining us on Coffee with Dan, and I look forward to seeing you soon.